In our last lesson, we talked about using trig to find missing sides, and then in this lesson, we're going to use trig to find missing angles. So our learning target is I can find missing angles using trigonometry. Okay, so here's the main concept for today. Okay, if you know the sine, cosine, or tangent ratio of an angle, you can use the inverse function, which is like sine to the -1, or we call inverse sine, cosine to the -1, inverse cosine, or tangent to the -1, inverse tangent, to find the measure of the angle. And once again, remember that your calculator has to be in degree mode in order for this to work. So even if you're using Desmos calculator, or you're using just like a scientific calculator on your phone, you can turn it sideways and make sure it's in the right mode. Okay, so here's the first one we're looking at. Here's my angle I'm referring to. 15 is my opposite side, and 24 is my longest side, so that's my hypotenuse. And the only trig function, and you can write them up here, sa, ka, toa. The only trig function that deals with opposite and hypotenuse is your sine function. So here's how you set it up. The sine of the angle equals opposite over hypotenuse. Okay, so what we do is we're going to use that part that I put a blue cloud around. We're going to do inverse sine, and we're just going to do inverse sine of the ratio we just wrote. So we're going to put this in our calculator, and we're going to round to 1 decimal place. So when you put this in your calculator, you get 38.7. And remember, we are talking about angle, so that is 38.7 degrees. If you look at the next one, we're talking about this angle, x, because that's the one that's labeled. 11 is our longest side, it's our hypotenuse. And 8 is touching x, so that is our adjacent side. Okay, the only trig function that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse is your cosine. So we'll write it just like we did yesterday. The cosine of x equals adjacent over hypotenuse. And then because we're trying to find an angle, we're going to use cosine to the -1, which is called inverse cosine. And we'll just type this in our calculator. And remember to round to at least 1 decimal place. So when we put this in our calculator, we get 43.3 degrees. And make sure you put your degree sign because you are talking about an angle. So that just helps you to remember what you're actually looking for. Okay, so we're going to do these the same way. So I'm talking about x. 20 is the side opposite from x. And 37 is not the hypotenuse, but it is touching x, so that's my adjacent side. So you can write out sa, ka, toa. And the only trig function that deals with opposite and adjacent is your tangent function. So the tangent of the angle equals the opposite over the adjacent. And because we're finding an angle, we're going to use our inverse tan function. And we're going to type this in our calculator, and we're going to round to the nearest tenth, because it says it up there. And that's 1 decimal place. So when I put this in my calculator, I get 28.4 degrees. Okay, if you look at number 4, I'm looking at x. 23 is my longest side, that's my hypotenuse. And 18 is touching x, so that's my adjacent side. And the only trig function that deals with adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So the cosine of x is equal to adjacent over hypotenuse. And then because we're finding the angle, we're going to do inverse cosine. 18 over 23. We're going to put that in our calculator. And we're going to round to the nearest tenth, so to 1 decimal place. And you get 38.5. And make sure you put your degree symbol. Okay, So what I want you to do right now is I want you to pause the video and I want you to try both 5 and 6. See if you can do it. Pause the video in 1, 2, 3. So the first thing that's always helpful to do is just label if you have opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse. The next thing you're going to do is write your trig functions. And then the last thing you're going to do is the next to last thing is you're going to use your inverse trig ratio. And now the last thing you're going to do is put this in your calculator and round to 1 decimal place. Alright, so you should get that number 5 is 77.3 and number 6 is 54.5. If you need further explanation, just let me know. So now what we're going to do is we're going to review finding sides and angles all together. So what we did today and what we did the previous day. So it gets a little confusing and you just have to look at the picture and try to figure out what you're actually looking for. So we're going to find the value of x and we're going to round to the nearest tenth. So if you look at number 7, notice that x is on the side. So I'm looking for a side length. Side. And then number 8, the same thing. So I'm looking for a side. So that's very important to make sure you understand if you're looking for a side or you're looking for an angle. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to label. So if I'm looking at number 7, 39 is my angle I'm looking at. So 11 would be my opposite side. And x would be my adjacent side. Alright, and then I know that the only trig function that deals with opposite and adjacent is tangent. So I'd write this tangent of 39 degrees equals opposite over adjacent. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of dividing by x. So what I'm really going to do is multiply both sides by x. So what happens is I get x times the tangent of 39 equals, these x's cancel out, 11. And I'm trying to get x by itself, so I need to get rid of tan 39. So since it's being multiplied, I'm going to divide both sides by tan 39. So x equals 11 divided by the tangent of 39. And when I put this in my calculator, I get 13.6. And that is a side length. Okay, if I look at number 8, my angle I'm referring to is 46. The side labeled 28 is my hypotenuse, my longest side, and then x is my adjacent. So I know that the only trig function that deals with these two is cosine. So the cosine of 46 equals the adjacent divided by the hypotenuse. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of dividing by 28, and I'm going to multiply both sides by 28. So 28 times the cosine of 46 is going to equal x. So all I have to do is put this in my calculator, and I get 19.5. Okay. So if I look at number 9 and number 10, it's pretty much the same. I'm looking for a side because it's out here, it's outside the triangle, and it doesn't have a degree symbol. That's how I know that. Alright, so what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video and I want you to try both of these. So pause the video and actually do it in 1, 2, 3. Alright, so here's my trig functions. I labeled them on my image, so I knew which ones to use. And now I'm going to, number 9, I'm going to get rid of the x by multiplying x to both sides. And then I would divide by tan 51. So 8 divided by tan 51. I put that in my calculator and I get 6.5. Alright, so hopefully that's what you got. Number 10, if I get rid of dividing by 31, I have to multiply both sides by 31. And when I put that in my calculator, I get 12.6. So hopefully that's what you got also. Alright, so notice the difference between these two. Now I'm looking for an angle. I know I'm looking for an angle because x is inside the triangle and it also has the degree sign. 12 is the same way. So I'm going to label 22 is my hypotenuse and 14 is my adjacent. So I know I need to be using cosine. So the cosine of x equals 14 over 22. And then because I'm looking for an angle measure, I have to do my inverse cosine. I just put this in my calculator, and I'm going to round to 1 decimal place, and I get 30.6. 12, kind of the same thing. 25 is my opposite, 78 is my adjacent. So the only trig function that'll work is tangent. Tangent of x equals opposite over adjacent. And then because I'm finding an angle measure, I'm going to use my inverse tan sine. And then when I put this in my calculator, I get 17.8. Oh, pencil wasn't working, sorry. Okay, I want you to pause the video and try these two in 1, 2, 3. Alright, so the answers you should get. 13 is 30.6. 14 is 31.8. So you can see if you got it wrong or if you got it correct. And if you need further explanation, you can message me. Okay, so let's look at these. So these are some weird problems where you're actually doing like multiple steps. So we're trying to find DE, and DE is over here. But before we can find DE, we need to find this side FD. So I'm going to put an X right there. Okay. So if I look at just the top triangle, I'm talking about 61. X is my opposite side, and 24 is my adjacent side. So the trig function I need to be using, tan 61 equals x over 24. Obviously, I'm going to multiply both sides by 24. I get the x is 43.3. So now, when I look at the bottom triangle, I'm going to put a y over here. I know that this side right here is actually 43.3. And I can set up my trig function again. The tangent of 19 equals y over 43.3. Obviously, we would multiply both sides by 43.3, and when we do that, we get 14.9. If you need extra explanation, just message me. Okay, so for number 16, I'm trying to find the measure of angle W. So I want to find this, but before I can do that, I need to find this side length right here. So I'm going to put an X right there. Alright, and then I'm just going to set it up. So the sine 25 equals 15 over X. I would have to multiply X to the other side. And then I would divide, so 15 divided by sine 25. So X actually equals 35.5. So if I know that this equals 35.5, I can use another trig function for that left side triangle. So, let's see. I could do the tangent of, let me put a y right here. Y equals 35.5 divided by 22. And then, of course, since I'm trying to find an angle, I'm going to use inverted tan. And I'll just type this in my calculator. And I get 58.2. And that is a degree symbol because we were looking for an angle measure. Alright, so now let's look at some application problems. I want you to pause the video and draw a picture. So try that in 1, 2, 3. Okay, so I'm trying to find what x equals. I can only use cosine for this one. So the cosine of 75 equals 6 over x. I would multiply x to the other side. Then I would divide by cosine 75. So 6 divided by cosine of 75. When I put that in my calculator, I get 23.2. That's how long that ladder is. Okay. I want you to try this one. First, I want you to draw a picture and make sure we get the same picture. And then I'll let you work it out. So just draw in the picture in 1, 2, 3. Okay, so here's what you're looking for. Hopefully your picture looks similar. Alright, and I want you to see if you can find the measure of angle X. So pause the video and try it in 1, 2, 3. So when you do this one, you should get 33.1. So hopefully that's what you got. And so now, if you'll just go try your assignment, and if you need any extra help, let me know.